Well, hello. Welcome back. Tony, we've been doing this a little while already, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm getting hungry.
I see that. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So if you're playing along at home, we recently just got done the version where we talked to Denman and Kayla about actually designing 18RoyalGorge. If you're listening in the podcast, then you might not even hear what I'm saying right now because I'll probably chop it together. However, we decided to do a separate video that's going to cover the gameplay, and that's where we are right now. So we're actually going to talk about 18RoyalGorge. Well, without further ado, Tony, let's bring in our guests. So
let's do it. Do it, baby.
All right. Well, hello, Denman and Kayla. How we doing?
Hey, doing good. Yeah.
Long time no talk. It's been a whole 30 seconds, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to join this already in progress. So we got done the yellow phase in the other one. We already talked to them about all the design chops and everything. Now we want to get into the meat of the game. So we're going to hop straight into the green phase here. Look at that. It works. It's like the guy knows what he's doing occasionally. Sometimes. So the green phase, we're going to we talked a little bit about the privates. So in the last interview, so we will sprinkle that in as Bjork decides to express his displeasure with that.
It's not Bjork.
Oh, no?
Bjork.
Bjork. I thought he was going to angrily play the guitar.
Now, hold on now. Bjork is like some Swedish singer, right? Or tennis player or something. And
Icelandic.
Bjork, as in Bourque, is a French-Canadian hockey player. And that's who the dog is named after.
Exactly.
Either way, somebody's borking in the background.
Someone's definitely borking. That means
Fair
my
enough.
wife is home
So,
with coffee.
Tony, I'm going to let you kind of lead us off into this green phase where we're going to be talking about the map, the stock market specifically, because you're a little more familiar with the area than I am. I'm just
not as familiar as these guys, but when we played, I thought the map was pretty interesting, and combined that with there's some variability in company access, right? And so. Mm-hmm. Seems to be lots of ways to develop tracks. I thought that was really cool. I was wondering maybe if you can talk about the map and the company availability and stuff.
Yeah. So making the map, while I was doing my research, Denman was sitting over there. He took a 1800s map of Colorado, and he kind of laid out an area. And then as we were reading the history and deciding what was going on, then that's when we picked the cities. So what do we need to include in this map? And so it goes anywhere from Denver, Pueblo, all the way up to Leadville, down to Salida.
Yeah.
And so we really were like, what can we include that has to do with the history? And that's kind of how we mapped out the map over an 1800s map.
I think that we kind of, throughout a lot of the design process, we let the history sort of guide those elements. I will say that with the map, we cherry picked a few places that were important to our history, like our own personal history. So and that would be like Florence and Canyon City, because those are the towns in Fremont County that we grew up in. And that's why the subtitle has the railways of Fremont County, because at the time, like Fremont County was very close to being a financial mecca within Colorado. Like history could have very easily gone a different direction. You had Coal Creek, which was a massive coal mining town. You had the Florence oil fields. I mean, there was oil mining all over, or oil drilling all over, Fremont County, and specifically in Florence. So there was a lot of ways where history could have gone a different direction. So a lot of it's based historically, the companies that are in there, the dates that they started and where they start, and the way they start in the specific tranches on the game board is all historically grounded. But probably based on the way history unfolded, those, if you fast forward to now, those counties and those towns aren't a big part of Colorado. Like most people probably don't know where those are at.
Most of them are very small.
Yeah, super small. But Florence is the antique capital of Colorado. So if you like antiques,
Interesting.
That's where you need to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you're building track on this map, you can do so lickety split. I mean, you can build some track, but it does cost not only terrain costs, but there's some other costs. Can you guys talk about how track gets built?
Yeah. So as I was researching, I came to find that the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company, which was out of Pueblo, had a huge stake in building the railroad tracks throughout Colorado. And just having the iron, they supplied a lot of the iron. So we wanted to incorporate that into the game. We did that a little differently. We didn't put it into a private. Instead, we made it to where you have to purchase your tracks from Colorado Fuel and Iron. So as you're purchasing, those prices go up. You can also be a shareholder within that company, which is a little bit different. So you're not just a shareholder on train companies, but you can also be a shareholder in Colorado Fuel and Iron for as long as that is profitable to you. So you have to think about, as you're buying track and you're laying these pieces, that you're also filling the pockets of your teammates, because if they own those stocks, they're going to get paid out from what you're purchasing. So you got to be careful not to give them too much.
Yeah. The development of the steel market was kind of interesting because originally we did think that this was going to be a private asset. I mean, this was not supposed to be a bigger component of the game, but reading into the history and just the severity of sort of the stake that Colorado Fuel and Iron at the time had in the railroad development, it was like, this should be a bigger part of the game. And so we came up with the idea for the steel market, and over time, that steel market did change a little bit. Early designs, that steel market resulted in sort of a rich get richer sort of a thing, but eventually it was tamed. And so I think new players, when they look at it, they go, oh, well, this seems kind of messed up. Everybody's going to buy up all the cheap steel, and then the other companies are going to get penalized just for operating later. But you guys probably notice, and most players notice this after the first play, is like, that's not what happens. There's really basically four companies running when there's 4 places to buy steel. And then when there's 5 companies running, the map is so developed that the availability of the steel doesn't play as big of a part. But what Kayla said is totally true, that you can build up to 6 track per turn and knock yourself out if you want, but that track gets really expensive. And if you're not heavily invested in the steel market and other players are, you're just passing money to other players.
Yeah, I really found it super interesting because it kind of definitely has the credit mobilier effect, right? Like it's kind of a really backdoor way to kind of get some money out of your company and into your pocket. I hate paying for track. Historically, if I'm playing like a 30 base game and I have to pay $20 a hex, I'm pissed off at somebody. But I don't know. I never felt that grievance when I was playing Royal Gorge, like, because I think because I had a couple shares, I'm like, well, I'm going to get some of this back. It's not the end of the world. Like it definitely, it took some of the sting out of that. Like,
we have seen too, and this is maybe sort of even more fringe, but we've seen people, typically like when you trash a company and you want to dump it on somebody, you'll pass that company's money to another company and then dump it on them, right? And what we've seen in at least a few plays is people spend ridiculous amounts of money on track just to waste the company's money and then dump that company on somebody else because they didn't have anywhere else to spend the money. And it was brutal to watch, but it was hilarious. It was totally fun.
Having that need for money to build track affected the way that I manage my investments, but we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Okay.
Kayla, you were talking about like investing in the Fuel and Iron Company gold mine, similar, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we took that steel market, and then we decided to kind of branch off and also create the gold mines. That's a big history of Colorado. You can still go visit a lot of gold mines.
There's still active gold mines in Colorado. In Victor.
And Cripple Creek area, there's active gold mines out there. So we wanted to incorporate that too. So throughout the game, there are hexes that hold gold, that are gold mines that you can ship that will add profit to your routes and your runs. But you can also hold stock in the gold mines and have that and get paid out that way too. So it just kind of integrates it all together.
Yeah, I would say that was actually maybe throughout the design process, that was one of the toughest things to balance out, because we really wanted that to feel like a gold rush. We wanted it to be lucrative early on and to sort of fizzle out as the game went on.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what happens. Gold is great early on, adding $50 to the run. And, you know, that means that other players are going to do it. So being invested in gold is a great idea. But at a certain point, you're like, get rid of these gold shares because the gold boom is over. And so I think we accomplished that really well.
So before we start talking about the stock market, the Royal Gorge itself, right? It's 18 Royal Gorge. It's like 3 hexes. Talk about that.
Yeah, so the 3 hexes, I mean, I can tell you that originally the whole concept of the game came from the idea that we wanted to do a 2-player only battle 18xx style, almost like 18xx meets war game that is very micro in scale, just about the gorge.
So that would have been an 18.4xx game.
18xx.
4xx game.
Yeah.
Clearly that didn't work out.
Yeah, not at all what happened.
No.
So if that sounded really good to you, that's not the game that you're going to get in this box. But
I'm okay now.
Maybe future release we can do that.
Maybe.
But the court case that occurred between Santa Fe and Rio Grande, basically, so for those that don't know, like what happened in the Royal Gorge was Rio Grande and Santa Fe fought over the Royal Gorge, over who was going to have access to the western slope. And so to the point, yes, Tony, where they hired gunslingers like Doc Holliday, this is why he's in the game, to literally shoot at each other while they were trying to build track through the canyon. And that entire thing culminated in a court case that called the Treaty of Boston. And eventually it gave rights to one of the companies. And
yes, that look, it's because I believe it's Santa Fe's headquarters was in Boston.
Oh, okay.
Because I had that same look. I was like, I don't understand the name of this.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Not at all. I thought it would have something to do with tea, but apparently it doesn't.
Right? So they went to court. Turns out that Rio got the rights to the gorge, and then they had to pay Santa Fe for what they had already built.
Yeah.
In upwards of millions of dollars, which, as we all know, in the 1800s was a lot of money.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we got the idea. We really wanted to incorporate that into the game and make sure that you kind of felt that. So we talked a little bit earlier about companies, and they change out. Those 2 companies will always be in your game. So Rio and Santa Fe will always be there. It just depends on how they come out.
Right. They can come out in later phases depending on what other companies are in the game, because they always open in the order that historically that they started in. But that little triplet of track, which is probably like I don't know that I've seen that that sort of shape of track in other games, but it's a very weird little shape of track. And the whole point of that is that there's basically, it's a piece of track with 2 cities on either side and then a dit in the middle. And the only company that will ever hit that dit is the Rio Grande. And so they have basically this really powerful route. And it was a really powerful route historically. So, and they gained that access. Now people can run to the gorge and hit the cities on either side of the canyon. They just can't run through the gorge. Rio Grande is the only company in the game that can do that. So
it's got stations blocking everybody else.
Yeah. And so those automatically come out when that event occurs in the game. Rio gets access to it. Their stations immediately block it. They can now start running from the Royal Gorge. And then we can talk about debt as well, because debt kicks in at that point.
Let's flip to stock market a little bit. I don't know if there's lots to say about the stock market. It's linear stock market, triple jumps are possible.
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't feel much like a stock manipulation game to me in my whole one play.
Right.
So if there's anything about that you want to talk about.
I mean, we went with linear because, again, we're trying to attract players who don't typically play 18XX. We want to bring in those players. And we felt linear is a little bit easier to understand. Not that a 4D stock market is hard to understand, but when you're looking at it, linear just seems much simpler to somebody. Like, you're just going up this track. That's the goal. You just want to move your thing up the track instead of up and over. And so we really just wanted to make that. That's why we made that choice there.
Cool.
Yeah, and there's a ton of interesting decisions in other styles of stock markets, and I'm not knocking on any of those at all. But again, a lot of the design elements went back to how do we make this as streamlined as possible, as simple as possible, without losing any of the meat of the game, right? And that 2D stock market was what we went with. So I think it simplifies a lot. And to your point, there's not a ton of stock manipulation. You're not, you can jockey for turn order on that track for sure. But even that's more difficult to do because only the president's shares affect that. And so, but the triple jumps are nice, the double and triple jumps, and you still have all solds, which is maybe less common when you're doing double and triple jumps, but it's definitely a relentless march up that track.
And there's also a few extra tokens sitting on that track.
Well, we'll come there.
Okay.
But so you talked about leaving some meat in the game. So incremental capitalization is definitely some meat. Why incremental cap and not full cap?
We both like incremental cap. I mean, I love full cap games too. I think we both do, right? I mean, but incremental cap it gives you a lot of flexibility on what you can do with a company, I think. And it also reserves a lot of decisions, I think, for other players, right? When you fully capitalize a company, you kind of have a lot of power right up front. You can grab that wheel immediately. Whereas incremental capitalization, I think there's more room for interactions with other players. We saw that in our game, right? Where again, I want to come back to the debt, but we'll get there. There's a lot of interplay where other players are funding your company, and I just think it's more realistic as well, right? Money doesn't come in 100% fold all at once. Yeah. So it's also really meaty because of the fact that you also have to pay a ton for track. So you're trying to fund your company with your money, and maybe you're buying minimal shares and you're hoping to get more, but it's you're also going to spend a ton of that money on track. Yeah. And so it almost feels like initially, I think for a lot of players, when you play the first time, it's I don't think mathematically this is going to work, right? Because I don't have to pay for all the track. Plus I'm going to try to extract some of that when I buy in my privates. And I'm this company's going to run out of money fast. And they do.
Well, I mentioned
they do run out of money pretty quick,
I was definitely in that situation. I mentioned that the track costs and things like that affected the way that I manage my investments, and I tried to in that game with the one game we played, right? I tried to minimize my own investment at least up front because I want those shares to pay in, and I tried to buy you guys as shares. Even though I was capitalizing you, I'd rather give you $90 than 120, right? Later on or something like that. Right. And I really enjoy cross investment in games, and especially when that's incremental capitalization. Cause hey, Chris, I love getting 30% of your victory points, right? That kind of thing. Right. And I felt I don't know. I felt like my cross investment decisions were a little extra juicy in this game because I don't want to give you money, but I'm eventually going to do that, and so I'm going to give you as little as possible. And it felt really good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, yeah. Shall we talk about choo-choo trains or?
Well, I think we need to talk about debt.
No, that's in the shenanigans.
Oh, you want to talk about that in
it now if you
shenanigans?
want. We can
Right?
talk
You're just
about it
gonna,
now.
y'all are just gonna have to wait for debt. Like,
Yeah.
it's gonna
no
come
worries.
due at some point, but we'll get there.
That's right. That's right.
Excellent.
Yeah, we talk
excellent.
about trouble.
Yeah, so let's push the purple phase because that's what we do, and that's where we talk about the train roster. And I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag right off the bat. You talk about this being a game where you're spending a lot of money from your companies. I would argue one of the things you're not spending a ton of money on is trains, because with the train limit of 2. You kind of have to be a little picky and choosy about what you're doing as far as the trains you have, the trains you're running, and what you're preparing for in the future, for sure.
Yeah. Well, the train roster is pretty streamlined, and the train limit of 2, again, so the train roster, what I'm going to say is, I mentioned 18MS earlier. A lot of 18MS was influencing the train roster. I think the train roster in 18MS is awesome, and I'll explain a few details. But one of them is the train limits. Like a static limit of trains to me is always interesting, and it's also again harkens back to the idea that we want this to be simplistic in nature for new players. Again, we're not removing the interesting bits, but can we simplify it to where, these interesting bits are the only thing that you're focused on? And so the train roster being limited to 2 gave us the ability to do that. Right. And we specifically in the graphic design marked out areas for your trains to slide under your charter. Again, kind of incorporating those Euro elements, but you are hard locked at 2. And so the other thing is that there's an export every single round. And when those exports occur in the first round, you'll export all the remainder of the 2 trains. And that's an interesting decision point too, because I loved our game the other day because did both of you train lock? I think both of you did. Yeah.
We both had 2 2s.
Yeah, so you guys both train locked with double 2s, which is great. You're running better routes or whatever. But one of you needs to get that 4 train, and one of you is going to get punished for 2 locking in the first set of ORs. So yeah, you can temporarily exceed that limit just to unlock that. But yeah, the train roster, I think, built off of that concept, like from a static limit.
Well, and the purpose of the exporting was just to shorten it a little bit, speed the game along so people aren't running out, because that was a goal of ours too. Like, we want this to be a weeknight game. Like, you can put it on the table, you can play an 18x at night after work, and you can get through it and not be there all night.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, sometimes you hear stories about somebody playing a game, like new people to the genre, and it took them like 6 hours to play 1846 or something because people didn't understand about the trains and stuff, right? And so like the exporting,
I had that experience real recently where somebody said, I had tried to get them into the hobby. They don't live in the state, or else I would have played with them, but they got in via 18 Chesapeake. And I was like, oh, how did it go last night with Chesapeake? And they're like, well, we stopped. We were 6.5 hours in, and I'm like, what?
To be clear, 18 Royal Gorge will not inflict that.
Ouch.
Yeah, brutal.
You guys talked about the 4 trains, and here's an inside joke from the game we played last weekend. I hear 4 trains are permanent. Because the reason that was a joke was because I was sitting here going, I got a 4 train. Where am I going to get the money for it? Wait a minute. It is permanent.
Yeah, there's no poison 4. It's a poison 3.
That's right. It's a poison 3.
Yeah. 4 trains are permanent.
Yeah.
Not a big, it's not a big rusting game, I would say. It's not about.
What's about managing?
Yeah. Yeah. But you definitely have to manage the train roster and keep up with it because of that relentless export too. you know, because originally when we designed it, it only exported non-permanent trains, so the 4s wouldn't export, and now it's just a relentless export. It just continues to export a train every round.
It's great. The trains are plus trains, right? So like you can scoop up all the little towns that you desire. I thought that was really cool. And then the big trains are like double 6s or something, right? It was a 6 train doubled. I didn't get to buy one, so I don't know. Yeah, Chris had 2. He was running 2 in one company. Yeah,
that was a monster. Yeah, that was a monster. Yeah, the 6.2s. So that's another interesting thing. Again, leaning on MS. One of my favorite things about MS. If you're not playing MS, you need to play MS. I'm just telling that to all these. Like, it's such a fantastic game. But the MS starts with plus trains, and then the diesels come out. And so early on, you're like, plus trains are sweet. I'm gonna steer into all these dits, and I'm gonna pick up all these big runs. And then these these diesels come out, and you're thinking, all right, well, I want to hit 4 stops and double it. But I've screwed this map up so royally that now I can't get around all of these dits that we were trying to steer into early. And so Gorge has a little bit of that where, you know, at the very end, you have these 6x2 trains that come out, and it's like, yeah, now you need to try to avoid these dits, and you're not going to be able to for the most part. I mean, I don't think anybody got a real clean run.
Yeah, I think the best I could do was 4 cities and 2 dits. I think that was as good as it got.
But you were running some big runs too.
Yeah, I had some. The offboards in this game are very lucrative, especially in the east and the west. So yeah, I was able to hit a couple of them, and the only gray town that comes out in the game, which happened to be my home base, that I was able to hit multiple times. So it really added up.
Yeah.
Kayla, you talked about, you know, the exports keeping the game going, you know, at a good pace and everything. I think there's another aspect that appeals to me in that same vein, and that is where a phase starts not when you buy the first train of a new type, but when that train's available, right? And so, like, even though all the 2 trains are gone, we're now in green, even though someone didn't buy a 3 train, for example. And I think that really makes things pick up too.
Right. It definitely speeds it along because, you know, as soon as that first set of ORs is done, you're going to be able to start laying that green track.
Yeah.
But again, we go back to that green track's going to cost you some more money. So you're going to get the ability to do it. You're also going to waste through that money faster. And so we really liked I think it helps with the confusion, right? Has somebody bought one, or is it when you see it, or we just wanted to make it simple. You see the color, you can buy the color.
Yeah,
that's it.
And we incorporated that graphically too. So, you know, you don't get this effect when you're playing on dot games, but the physical game itself has a train deck. And Korea did this too, where they added cards in to signify the phases. Ours is just, you know, the deck is sorted numerically on the back. So you just sort them by number 1 through 20 something, and then you flip that thing over onto the board, and it will walk you through the game as trains get bought. When you see that card, resolve the event, and you're into a new phase. So, yeah, I mean, graphically, we walk people through those phase changes, and I think it, you know, cleans up that process a bit.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think as a new player, when you get the chance to do the upgrades and you get a chance to kind of make your route better, I think it's a clever point, right? And I get to feel like I really accomplished something. Just sitting there waiting because you need the next person to buy a train to get there, it's not a good feeling. So being able to capitalize on that, you know, because the train came out at the export, I think it's definitely it's a good touch point in the game, and I think it helps people coming in because it takes away some of those little, like, you're taking the edge off the rust a little bit, you know, just because you know, I was train locked on the 2s, but even though I was train locked, I was able to buy the 4 because it rusted out the 2s. and I was able to get in and do that. So it allowed me, it gave me the room to do that. Where in a normal game, we're just waiting until you start a company, Demon, and do that, or we're waiting forever until the game exports a fork, right? Like,
right.
So I think
your point. Go ahead.
No, I think it's a really good choice because I think it gives people a little freedom to kind of like go, oh, well, in a normal game that might be screwed up, but I can do that here, and that's great.
Right. Well, to your point about the track laying, about feeling clever about track lay, and we didn't mention this, and we should, because Tony had the epiphany in the game when he started laying track, and he was like, I want to make it green next time. I'm like, well, you can make it green now. He's like, in the same turn? I was like, absolutely. So, one other thing about the track laying is there's no limitations on that. You can, again, you're paying for the track, but if you're in brown phase and you want to lay a yellow tile and then make that yellow tile a green tile and then make that green tile a brown tile, you can do it. You just got to pay for it.
Yep.
And you pay a lot to do it, but sometimes it's so
you might
if
have
the
to
steel's there.
right?
Yeah, you just got to pay for the steel to do it.
I got to get this city to brown so I can get my station in there. More money.
Yeah.
Any more choo-choo train talk, or are we ready to talk about debt finally?
Well, we can talk. There's one more thing. So one other thing that we took from 18 Korea is buying trains over. So you must be connected. So your companies need to be connected to transfer trains to the other company. Yeah. We did that when we played Korea and we read that rule. It was like this light bulb went off. Like, why don't all games do that? How are they getting the trains there if they're not connected? Are we just like
horse-drawn wagon? Or how are we moving that train?
So we really like that. That's more, realism into the game, and so you do have to be connected to be able to buy those trains over.
Yeah, helicopter is a good idea, Tony. I don't know what the 1800s helicopters look like, but
wasn't it called like an ornithopter? Like
I definitely don't think they were lifted a 4x2. That's for sure.
No.
Yeah. So that's a cool rule. I think that should, honestly, just be
that should be in more
standard
games for sure.
Yeah, it makes
really
a lot of sense. It didn't come up because I only owned one company, so that was.
And it's probably not as important of a rule in our game as it is in Korea, because in Korea you can legitimately accidentally get cut off from the company, and you're like, well, that company is going to die in North Korea. So
right, or you have something that's just completely in the north and completely in the south, and nothing in the middle. So it makes a lot of sense for sure.
Makes a lot of sense there, but just makes a lot of sense.
Agreed. Agreed.
We had to pull that in. So cool.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent.
All right. Go shenanigans.
You want shenanigans? Let's get the shenanigans. We're going to move on to the gray phase. So the gray phase, when we get to talk about all the shenanigans this time, we'll include a little bit of the feels. I think you can kind of get a sense for our feelings on the feels. But Tony, I want to talk about deck because I think the deck. It was fun to watch. I didn't participate, so I got to enjoy it from the distance. But I loved that.
To not participate.
Yeah, exactly. I love that when we set up, like there's 3 extra things that are out on the board because we have both the gold and the iron company are out, the steel and iron company are out on the board. But there's also this debt marker that's running in the stock market. And of course, I'm like, what's that for? Because was it kind of some quirky loan system? Like I didn't know what it was initially. But turns out like it was what you guys were alluding to earlier about the Rio and the Santa Fe and the debt that they owed each other. And then, well, also it didn't come out in our game, but Doc Holliday as well, I guess, would also fall in that, correct? So how did you get to... The thing is, the debt marker moves. It doesn't stay put. It climbs, which I love. And that's actually one of my favorite things ever is like, I want to let you describe how it works because I think it's, I didn't feel the pain of it. And so I just got, like I said, I just got to watch the fun.
Yeah, I think So first it was like we talked about, right? The court case, somebody's got to pay this debt, and Rio's going to pay Santa Fe. And how do we incorporate that? Because that's a huge part of history. And so we thought of the debt marker. And to be honest, in the beginning, the debt marker did not work out great. I think it didn't even start as a debt marker. It started as like a lump sum. It was just, once this happens, you're paying Santa Fe this lump sum. And so then that wasn't great. Didn't feel good. Didn't really bring that much interest into the game. So
no pressure.
No pressure. Like you're paying $100 or whatever it is. So finally we were just thinking about different ways, and we thought, the debt would be really cool to put a debt icon. It's, it's on the track. It's going to increase. So that pressure's there. You have the choice, if you are running Rio, to pay that right away. Pay it while it's low and get it out, but you're losing money out of your company. So do you wait and pay that later? I think there's 2 debt tokens per.
Well, there's so Doc Holiday has 2, and then Santa Fe has the 4. And so there's. Well, so that's kind of confusing to say, but like Rio go.
Yeah.
Well, Kayla, you said, and you're losing money. Even worse, I'm giving it to the other company. Like when I was paying my debt tokens, I am feeding Denman money.
Yeah. That's a fun point in the game too. I mean, we experienced it at ours where you're like, maybe I should pay a debt down. I'm like, absolutely, you should pay a debt down.
It's like, I want to pay it now while it's $80 or something, right? To get rid of one of those tokens. But I'm giving you $80, but I'm taking $80 out of my company, and I need it to buy tracks and stations and.
Right.
Well, that's really another thing too, is like, so like Kayla mentioned, like originally it was a lump sum payment, and that was, one, it was kind of brutal. You just had to pay this massive sum of money. And originally, like if your company didn't have the money, then you were personally liable for it, just like trains. And we kind of experimented with different stuff, but the debt marker works really well now because it sort of gamifies the whole debt system, where instead of this just being a thing that happens to you, it's a thing that you can manipulate, and you can decide, hey, do I want to pay the debt now? Because like you said, you're giving it to another company, but I want to pay it when it's cheap. Yeah. But then at the same time, could I hurt Denman really bad by not paying him the debt? Like, does he really need that money? Because if he does, and this happened in our game, right? Like, you didn't pay off your last debt marker, and I had to buy a train. So that cost me $90 or something like
personal.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what debt was, but I was just like, hey, are you going to pay a debt? And he was like, no. And I was like,
I couldn't afford it probably because that marker every round just keeps getting
marches.
Yeah. And so we put the limitation too that like, you can only pay off 1 debt per operating round. And so that kind of throttles the ability. Because the other thing is, because the game moves so quickly, you can probably skip a few ORs and decide when to pay debt. But if you're not careful and the game, like people really push the game hard, you could get to a point where I don't have enough operating rounds to pay off this debt. And what happens if you don't pay off your debt is basically your stock price drops.
It just plummets.
Yeah. So if Rio paid no debts off, your price is going to go down 8 spaces. Which is, I mean, realistically, it's just like, it's not an option.
It's basically, you just lost the game. Like, there's no coming back from that.
Yeah. So, but if you paid off 1, then your stock's going to drop 5 spaces. And if you paid off another one, it's only going to go 3. And so you're penalized for not paying off debt by the end of the game.
And then the other piece is Doc Holiday we've talked about. So he wasn't in your game, but if he is in the game, he has 2 debt tokens. So as Rio's paying Santa Fe has to pay Doc because they are the ones that hired Doc Holiday to take out Rio's people. So if he's in the game, he's a great asset to have, but Santa Fe's got to pay him. So if you're Rio and you want to be Rio and Doc's in the game, like you want to get Doc because you're getting that money back.
Yeah.
So it's more of that, like, how do I game the system and how do I think about it?
Yeah. The other crazy thing is like Doc has some income attached to him. So and he only closes when his debts are paid.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have Doc, you may just not pay his debts. You might let that thing rise.
And he's just going to
keep collecting
paying.
income and then pay him off right at the end of the game to extract the money from that company. You know, you see games where somebody's running Rio and they're you know, taking money from Rio and paying Santa Fe, but they also own Doc, and Santa Fe is going to have to pay some of that money back to Doc, and they're personally going to collect. I mean, just wild scenarios with the debt.
That's cool.
That makes the game really interesting, and that's why. You know, so Doc comes out randomly. We have a variant in the rule book that, you know, you can draft the privates and just pick the privates that are going to be in the game, which I think is totally fun. You know, just pick the privates that you want to see in the game. Just make a wild ride for everybody. We've done that with Korea, right? Where it's like,
100%.
hey, let's lay out 10 of these things and everybody pick, you know, and just
go crazy.
Have a good time. So, yeah, the debt allows for a lot of weird shenanigans. So,
yeah.
Some shenanigans that I think are cool, and we kind of talked a little bit about it earlier in like talking about the game design and everything, but like the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company and the Victor Gold Mining Company, right? Like, if you at the beginning of the game, everyone's building track, so those Colorado Fuel and Iron shares, for example, are going to be paying good money and advancing in value in the stock market, and so you want to.
And they also tend to be a little cheap too.
But you also usually need to buy shares of your company to fund your company to do those things. And Chris, that's that, you know, circle of money thing you were kind of talking about there. And, and you know, and like, I'm sitting here watching Denman, he bought like 6 shares of the Colorado Fuel and Iron Company. And I don't think because you didn't start a company, right? In that first.
No, I think I spent too much money on privates and I was going last.
Well, and I think something to note, in the very beginning of the game, there's only 2 companies to start. So if you're playing with any player,
and me and Chris,
somebody's going to have to start as an investor.
Yeah.
And that's a little different. And people feel a little weird about that. But we had somebody play a full investor strategy, like the whole game until the very end. And he came in second. So
that's cool.
I think had he played it just a little bit differently, he could have won that game because it wasn't far behind. So it is a different strategy that you could play.
Yeah. It's definitely a viable start, right? Like I think, you know, that's kind of what Denman did was he started with all the, you know, the Iron Company, the Fuel and Iron Company shares, and then kind of pivoted into the Santa Fe, you know, later in the game. So I think it's totally doable.
Yeah. And I don't even know that, I mean, after the first set of ORs, the second tranche of companies comes out. So there's 2 more companies to start. So theoretically, after the first set of ORs, each player can own their own company. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're playing a 4-player game, for the first round, only 2 people are going to be running the company. So that means 2 people are going to be playing investor. And you know, investor doesn't sound glamorous, but it's a really interesting fold because if somebody goes investor strategy, like in our game, right? I bought into the steel company pretty heavy while you guys were buying your own shares because I know you're going to build track. You have to build track, right?
Yeah.
So you have 2 options when we go into the operating round. I could build a ton of track, in which case I'm kind of giving Denman a ton of money because he's leading the shares in that. Or maybe I don't build as much track. Maybe I go a little less aggressive on track. I don't run as big of runs, but he's not getting all the money from the steel. So the investor strategy, like you said, Chris, I mean, it's a great start to the game. I don't think that, you know, like granted, he came in second. He came pretty close.
You got to have a company.
Yeah, I think at some point you got to run a company just for share density purposes, and so I think you just you could maybe run the investor strategy beyond the second tranche opening up, but at some point you got to get in the company game because I just don't think you can win off of a full investor strategy. But it just gives you a lot more.
Yeah, and the cert limit's a little, I don't want to say it's low, but it's definitely tight where, you know, you need that you need at least that 1 double share, especially with some of the privates, because my private counted against my shares, so, and never closed. So it was one of those things where I definitely needed to have 2 presidencies to kind of compensate for that.
Right.
For sure.
That's an interesting private, by the way, you brought up that, that private gives you $25 of income right from basically the start of the game, which sounds sweet, but it holds up a share space. And later on in the game, you're just like, yeah, I wish I could get rid of this thing.
Yeah, it's the trade-off for early money, and you can't buy it in, and you can't sell it, and you can't convert it, and it's kind of you're hanging it on your head the whole time for sure.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this goes into shenanigans, but some people don't like that company, that it holds up a space, and that's fine. If everybody passes, we can talk about this, but if everybody passes on a private asset in the initial auction, it just leaves the game. It doesn't reduce in price, so it's just gone. And so you see games where there's only 3 private assets in the game.
I think we lost one of the 5, didn't we? I think we did.
We did. I don't remember what we passed on, but we just didn't like it, and it just left the game. So then there were 4.
I just didn't want to spend more money.
Yeah, exactly. When you're staring down having to own a company, pay for track, pay for this, pay for that, you're like, yeah, I think I'll save a few bucks here.
Yeah, for sure.
Excellent.
Cool. What else? Any other shenanigans, as they say?
I mean, it's I don't think there's traditional shenanigans. I think the shenanigan is in the play itself. I think it's, that things are all slightly different, and there are a lot of smaller levers to pull in the process of the game, rather than just like, oh, this is the single MacGuffin of this game, right? Like
the big thing.
Yeah, I feel like that, the way the privates come out, I think even the way the majors come out, the way the track's going to get laid, because that's going to be different every single game when you have different companies opening, where they open. Demon, you made several comments like, I've never seen track laid like this, just because it was Bizarro Land the way it came out. And it's, when you have a game that has greedy dits, people are going to go for them, and you're going to see the weirdest track you can get. I remember, my favorite line from Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is he's like, I can do whatever I want. You're going to see some weird stuff. Just like, I kind of feel that way when it comes time for being able to lay 6 track and being able to pick up all the dits. Like, you get greedy, and, you definitely, you built some interesting stuff as a result. And I think that, so I think the shenanigans, I think the Royal Gorge itself is a giant shenanigan, but I think, being tied to a specific company, that may or may not affect you, but it's, you have to consider it, because there's usually good cities on either end of it. So you're going to try to run to it. And then there's always the sniping of gold, because somebody else linked up to gold, or they got real close, and you're like, I can run in there and grab that nugget and add $50 pretty easily. I'm going to go do that. And then you snag it.
Yeah. So. I mean, what you bring up is totally true, because the dits, you're running around trying to collect these dits because they're greedy, but you're also trying to drive right into the gold mines, because you're like, well, there's also gold up here. So like, if I just throw another hard curve and a straight, I could just get to this gold mine and I could ship that.
Meanwhile, you're
$40 more dollars.
Yeah.
And then we actually, then we backed up against the problem of running out of straight and gentle curve yellow track. So now we're like, well, now I have to upgrade stuff to get that track, to be able to lay it over there to get to that gold. Otherwise, or you're hate laying track using it all up.
Yeah, exactly.
No, and there's definitely the potential for some hate track of just wasting track with those 6 track per turn. You can just be blasting through the roster and just wasting all the track that people need. But I think what you said is true about the entire thing being a shenanigan, because I feel like, a lot of titles, you get to a certain point in the game and then it's like, all right, now the shenanigans are going to begin. I'm going to try to move this company. I'm going to try to dump this thing. I'm going to try to manipulate the turnover on the stock track. With Royal Gorge, it's more like there's so many little nuanced things happening all at the same time. It's like in our play, I'm like, I'm hoping that I can get to this gold first, but Tony just gave me money because he owes me debt. Should I pay that debt to this other asset, or should I waste it here? And also, I don't have enough money to pay for all this track, but it's like, should I dump these gold shares? So like, there's all these like weird elements going on at the same time. So the whole thing just feels like, a giant shenanigan. I mean, there's just weird stuff happening, and it happens like right out the gate. I mean, from start to finish.
Yeah.
100%.
Right on.
Awesome.
Let's go to the next phase. Do we have what's after gray? Since
usually it's the priority deal marker.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So Tony loves to have different priority deal markers, and it's rubbed off on me a little bit. Is there going to be like a little Gorge model? Is it going to be like a little 3D print? Like what are you thinking?
So the priority deal marker in our game is a poker card. It's kind of a authentic poker card. It harkens to the gunslinging Wild West of the game. And but I will say that for the Kickstarter, we do have a stretch goal that will be a custom shaped wooden meeple. I won't spoil that for the Kickstarter because
he won't, but I will. So
love it.
It's gonna be a revolver. So true to the battles, we decided to make it a revolver.
I love it.
Doc Holliday.
Yeah.
Yep.
So do Chris and I a favor, if you would, and perhaps people watching and listening, is two things. What is the sales pitch that you want to say to people to back your game, and then talk about your Kickstarter plans?
Okay.
All right, go ahead. You're ahead.
So, I mean, I guess the goal for 18Gorge, and we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, is we want to pull in new players. There's a lot of games out there. So we didn't want to just add another title to the collection. We wanted a title that brought new players, new blood to the 18XX genre, because we think it's such an important genre within the echelon of board games. So that was our main drive for the game, but we also wanted it to be a super interesting 18XX game. So I guess like in short, I would say if you're a Euro player and you haven't dove into 18XX yet, this game is for you. And if you're an 18XX player and you're just like a diehard 18XX player, this game is for you. That would be my short abbreviated pitch for the game.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. I think it makes total sense. Very approachable in that regard. For sure.
Yeah. Like, I keep track of my plays, right? So, my play of Royal Gorge was number 855. So I definitely, felt challenged and interested, throughout the game and everything like that. Right. So even though I'm a veteran, I guess you might say, I thought there was a lot of fresh things going on, and I thoroughly enjoyed my time.
Agreed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You guys had fun. I had fun playing with you guys. So
yeah. As far as Kickstarter,
what's going on? Yeah.
We are planning to launch November 11th.
Yep. That's happening.
There's already a page up that you can start to follow so you can get those notifications. And I believe we're leaving it up are we doing 3 weeks?
Yeah, it should be up for, it's just under 3 weeks. So it'll just go right to the end of November. So from November 11th to, November 29th or something like that. So maybe just shy of 3 weeks.
Excellent.
So if you just Google, 18RoyalGorge Kickstarter, it definitely pops up, and you can go follow the page and subscribe to it. And I guess when this airs, the Kickstarter will be going.
Oh, that's true.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. We will definitely get with you on timing of that to make sure that they sync up. So, Excellent. Well, thank you guys both so much for joining us. This was a lot of fun. We took a little more time than normal, but I think there's a lot to talk about. I think there's a lot to this game. There's a lot of meat on the bone. There's, getting the point across. I think that it's it's not a hard one to learn, I think is crucial. And I think it's anybody familiar with the system can pick it up very easily. And I think anybody new to the system, you should not have that 5-hour game. Like even if you're learning, this game is not that. It's definitely very streamlined. I love what you did to kind of make it new player friendly, but also, seasoned player engaging, I think is the best way to put it. I think it works on both levels for sure.
Well, we want to say thank you to you guys.
Yeah,
we totally
absolutely.
appreciate you bringing us on here and, getting it out there to the listeners to, as to what the game's about and how the design process went. So we totally appreciate the opportunity. Been longtime listeners of Wheel Tapping and totally appreciate what you guys do for the hobby. So, and just for the listeners out there, these guys did tell me in the beginning of the episode, when to introduce ourselves, not to give out my address. But I do just live a couple miles from Tony. So if you want Tony's address, just at me, get in my DMs.
Just show up on a Thursday night. That's all.
Yeah, that's right.
Sounds good. Come on over. We'll play some games, right? Whoever you are.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
The friendliest local game route I have to fly 4 hours for. What can I say?
there you go. We're your extended local game group. That's right.
Indeed. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to let you guys go get dinner, and we're going to sign off. Thanks for joining us, and good luck with the campaign. And if you guys are listening, I encourage you to check it out so you can see the visuals. It's there. At the time of the recording, it's in alpha. It may be out and in beta by then. So, the alpha was pretty solid. I think we only encountered 1.5 little hiccups. But it's pretty solid. It'll, at the very minimum, it'll get you a great feel for the game. So I encourage you to go check it out. Hey, kick the tires. We can do that now. That's a good thing. All right. So without further ado, have a great one. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. This Week in Each Week is brought to you by Game Toppers. Upgrade your gaming experience at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you next time.